holiday of Shavuos, the upcoming holiday that we're going to have in a couple of days from now. I want to analyze and ask the question as to what exactly we're commemorating, what exactly happened on this day, the 6th day of Sivan. So if you ask any kid, any Jewish kid in any Jewish day school, what are we celebrating on Shavuos? They'll say, we're celebrating that we got the Torah, the day we got the Torah. And I think that we have to really understand, what does that mean? What did we get? Did we get the books of the Torah, like the scrolls, the Torah scrolls? There's a major problem with that. If we got the Torah scrolls, well, we know that Shavuos was only 50 days into the Jews' sojourn in the wilderness, and they had another 40 years that they spent in the desert, and lots of events happened that are recorded in the Torah. So obviously, it doesn't make sense that they got the Torah, which describes narratives and events that happened only afterwards.
Good point, I guess, but the Torah never says that the holiday of Shavuot commemorates the giving of the Torah. It's just the first fruits holiday in the Bible. The connection with the giving of the Torah was made up much later.
So they clearly didn't get the written Torah. In fact, the Talmud says, there's a debate in the Talmud as to when exactly they did get the written Torah. Did they get it incrementally as it happened? As it happened, the Almighty instructed Moses to write down this and give it to the Jewish people? Or did they get it all the way at the end? When Moses is about to die, they got the written Torah.
Well, are we talking about mythology or actuality? It's important to make that distinction. In actuality, there probably was no written Torah much before the Babylonian exile. That's just the plain sense you get from reading the books of the prophets. They don't know about any written Torah.
Either way, everyone agrees that the written Torah we call the 5 books of Moses, the Chumash, the Jews that did not get it did not get it in its entirety on Shavuos. So what exactly did happen? So it's important to note that Shavuos is the first, or really the week of Shavuos was the first time that the Jews were encamped at Mount Sinai, but they were actually there for an entire year. And the Midrash goes on to tell us that during this year, the Jewish people received the Torah, the laws of the Torah, what we would call the oral law. What to do, what does being Jewish mandate? When the Jews left Egypt, they became a nation. And as a nation, right on the doorstep, or on the footsteps, on the heels of them leaving Egypt, they're now Jews. Well, how do Jews act? They get the Torah, and they get the instructions of what it means to be Jewish. So what are the holidays? What are the rituals? What are the practices? Laws of kosher, laws of tzitzis and tefillin and prayer and all of that. All of those laws they actually received orally from Moses at Mount Sinai over the course of a year.
Okay, that's a nice story. What makes you say it actually happened?
And that pretty much started Shavuos. But on Shavuos itself, all we got was the 10 Commandments. And the 10 Commandments being 10 mitzvahs in the Torah, 10 mitzvahs and 10 fundamental mitzvahs, in fact, so fundamental that they seem to be a microcosm of all of Torah.
When you say we got them, do you mean they were spoken to Moses? That is the impression you get from the narrative in Exodus. The people were afraid and retreated to a distance so they wouldn't hear God's voice. I mean, that's as far as the story goes.
If you were to analyze these 10 Commandments, you'll find that these 10 Commandments really encapsulate everything that the Torah in its entirety wants to convey to you. 10 mitzvahs, well, there's still 603 more of them. But primarily, what we got on Shavuos was the experience of Shavuos. And what I mean by the experience of Shavuos, what was there to experience? Moses went up to the mountain and he came back and gave us the tablets with the 10 Commandments. Is that right?
Is that right? Well, the Sinai narrative in Exodus is a pastiche, really more of a hot mess, I'd say. Moses goes up and down the mountain several times, talks to God from several different places, and the account of what he writes and gives and says is very jumbled. I made a video about that. I'll link it above.
Is that right? Actually, it's wrong. If you open up the book of Exodus and you read the description of what happened, it wasn't just Moses receiving these 10 commandments. It wasn't just Moses having a wonderful experience of prophecy on the Mount Sinai. It was, in fact, all the Jews, millions of Jews, right? 603,500 adult males in the age of 20 and 60, which you could safely presume you would have a likewise amount of females, maybe even a little bit more females. As we know in America, there's more females than there are males, because males die in things called war and bungee jumping. Either way, so we could assume there's at least 1.2 million adults between the age of 20 and 60, plus you have to account for some elders, and of course some young people, and you have a number which is at least 1.5 million, maybe even 2 or even north of that.
Well, that's lovely, but that's just part of the story. Why would I believe that really happened?
So you have a lot of people there, and the Torah says that it wasn't just Moses getting the Torah or having this experience as revelation at Sinai. It was the entire nation. Every single person, every single Jew.
Interesting. What experience does it say the entire nation had? It says they saw fire and smoke and so on, and experienced fear. What other experience did they have?
Was at the foot of the mountain, and they experienced prophecy.
I don't think it says that anywhere in Exodus. Are you going to give a citation?
They saw with absolute clarity God.
They saw God? Who saw God? The only account of seeing God is the strange narrative of Exodus 24, where Moses and the elders and a couple of others see God's feet. Other than that, there's no account of seeing God in Exodus, and Deuteronomy takes great pains to say that they did not see God. So what verses are you talking about?
Whatever that even means. We don't even know what that means, because to us, prophecy is an interaction, a sensual, sensual as in with use of the senses, interaction with God. That's something we can't even wrap our heads around. To us, God is so distinct, is so different than anything that we can wrap our heads around, because we are finite. God is infinite. So how do you understand something that doesn't exist in time and space?
So, if we can't understand, in principle, what they experienced, and the narrative doesn't even say they experienced anything anyway, what exactly are you talking about?
It's just an idea for us. But for a prophet is someone who encounters God with his senses. He talks to God, he communicates with God, he sees visions of God. The Jewish people, every single one of them at Mount Sinai, had prophecy.
I don't see any verses to that effect in Exodus. What are you looking at?
And this experience, this wonderful experience that the Jews had,
an experience that you just said we can't understand, and for which you provided no source,
is the foundation of our religion.
So the foundation of our religion is an experience that we cannot understand. Well, that sounds very promising.
How so? Our religion was founded with an experience with a revelation that has never been matched by any other religion.
Well, hold on. What do you mean our religion was founded? According to the story, the Israelites were already a distinct people with a distinct God before Sinai. Sinai represented one of several covenants reported in the Bible, actually more than one of several covenants, but I'm not sure it's accurate to consider it the founding of the religion. God makes a point of saying he's the same God that was already worshipped by their forefathers. So if Sinai is the foundation of Judaism, then what was all that before? As far as never being matched by any other religion, I guess you'll have more to say about this, but do you mean that no other religion tells such a good story? And what exact story would that be? That a nation was afraid to hear God speak and retreated to a distance? 'Cause that's the story in Exodus.
No other religion even claims to have had a revelation to the masses. Right?
What do you mean by revelation, and what do you mean by masses? Jesus was reported to have been seen by many people both before and after he died. Would that count as a revelation to the masses? If not, why not?
It's either one man in New York with some golden tablets, or one guy in Medina, Mecca, right, having prophecy. That's the claim.
Okay, that's their claim, but what's your claim? Where is the mass revelation in Exodus?
No one else even claims to have a prophecy experienced by millions.
And neither do we, at least not in Exodus. Wouldn't it be helpful to cite verses? That's the way Bible study is typically done. I don't know if you're talking about the account in Exodus, Deuteronomy, Nehemiah, or just making something up on the fly.
Why don't they claim that? Because it's something which is easily debunked,
Is it? Let's hear.
right? If you can't convince someone that they saw something that they didn't see, no one would follow Moses if Moses walked around and said, "Oh, you saw God, and you saw God, and you saw God." And he writes it in a book, and he gives this book to the Jewish people. The Jews would throw it out. This is not the word of God. This is Moses made it up. I was there. I didn't see nothing.
Well, the book doesn't say you saw anything other than fire and smoke and so on, but yeah, if you don't remember any of that happening, I can see that would be a bit of a problem. But what if the story is told 800 years after the events allegedly happened? How are you going to debunk it then?
For the fact that the Jews adopted the law and adopted it fastidiously and practiced it for generations and taught it to their children.
Slow down, Sparky. If you read Joshua and Judges and Kings and so on, there is almost no indication that anyone kept anything or even knew anything for hundreds of years. But what does that have to do with Sinai? People of all faiths know stuff and do stuff related to their faith. You know stuff and do stuff, and you never saw a revelation, so this point seems totally immaterial. Let's get back to debunking. You said it's easy to debunk the claim of mass revelation. So let's say the claim is made 800 years after the events. How are you going to easily debunk that?
And kept even the laws that weren't so easy to keep, like laws of Shabbos, laws of Shemitah.
We really don't know what people were keeping, but the sabbatical law seems like something they were certainly not keeping. The curses of Leviticus 26 make it sound like violation of the sabbatical year was viewed as a serious problem whenever that was written. Nehemiah 10:32 certainly makes it sound as if it was not being observed in his time and earlier generations, and 2 Chronicles 36:21 makes it sound as if violation of the sabbatical year was the cause of the Babylonian exile. But we're way off track now. Let's recap. You say there's an account of mass revelation, but you provide no citation, and I don't see one in Exodus. You say no other religion has such an account because it's easily debunked. But you don't show how it would be possible to debunk it in generations long after the supposed event. You say Jews' fastidious observance of the religious commandments is testimony to their prophetic experience, but that's irrelevant for subsequent generations, and there's no evidence of fastidious observance of anything anyway, quite the opposite. So what have you accomplished, and what are you trying to accomplish? I don't even know at this point.
All the restrictive laws and diet and the life practices that the Torah, God in His infinite wisdom, has taught us and has instructed us and has even restricted us. No one would accept that if they knew it was baloney.
How would they know in later generations? How do you know? It sounds to me like you are on the cusp of declaring every religion to be true. Why would Muslims fast for an entire month if they knew it was baloney? Why would Christians go to church if they knew it was baloney? Why would people around the world have sacrificed their children or themselves if they thought it was baloney? Must be. It's not baloney. That's your drift, right?
So, indeed, if we examine the holiday of Shavuos, it's important for us to recognize that, yes, we got the Torah, but what did we actually get? We didn't get the written Torah, we got the oral Torah.
And how do you know that?
That was the beginning. But on Shavuos itself, it was all about the experience, the revelation, the faith-building exercise that the Jewish people experienced and have taught to their children and continue to perpetuate on.
Are you going to give evidence for anything you said? What's the evidence that anyone was teaching about any mass revelation in the time of the prophets?
Onward. And it's a time for us to regain confidence in our faith.
Well, you're not giving me any confidence.
It's a time for us to try to relive that experience and say, wow, this is something that my ancestors were there. My ancestors at Mount Sinai, 3,326 or 7 years ago, we have documentation
No, we have a story.
of the people, the names, where they lived, where they went to, their sojourns, where there were different places that they stopped.
Interesting. Let's look at the different places that they stopped. Numbers 33 has the long list. Let's check out what happened when they stopped at Sinai. Interesting. Nothing.
They ended up in Israel, and they're all our ancestors. And they taught us and our parents and our grandparents the practice of Jewish law and tradition.
Yes, and you believed it without ever having had any revelation, and so did your teachers, and so did their teachers. So none of this demonstrates that there ever was a revelation. All you needed was the story. Just like all Islam needs is the story, and all Christianity needs is the story. It's all same.
So I think it's time for us to just think about that. Open up a book of Exodus. Read the story. Read what it says.
Yes, please read the story, and tell me which verse describes the mass revelation.
Don't just take the images and the perceptions that were developed as young people in our childhood as to what actually happened at Mount Sinai. It's unfortunate that most Jews, when they think of Moses, think of Charlton Heston. And when they think of Mount Sinai, they think of the Ten Commandments, 1956, Cecil B. DeMille.
What else would you think of?
It's unfortunate. Read the book. Just read what it says.
Well, you make that sound easy, but the account is largely incoherent. Again, check out my video that attempts to break the narrative down frame by frame. You'll see pretty quickly that you're really looking at a mashup of several different stories that don't go together in any nice way. So I don't think you can say, just read the book and get the real story. I bet you didn't. And anyway, it was all written hundreds of years later, so it's basically just all fiction. You're basically telling people to read the Lord of the Rings trilogy to get the real facts, rather than relying on the movies. It's not bad advice, but you're still not getting the real facts because there are no real facts. It's fiction.
It says clearly that the entire nation saw it.
Saw what? The fire and smoke and lightning? Yes, it says that. It doesn't say they saw anything else. And like I said, Deuteronomy makes it very clear that they did not see God. And in any case, it's a story.
Everyone saw it. And after the Sinai experience, and throughout the years that the Jews were in the wilderness, there were lots of problems that the Jews had. There were lots of fights that they had with Moses. There were lots of claims and rejections on his leadership. But no one even once in the history of the Jewish people has questioned the legitimacy of this experience. No one.
Well, no one knew about this experience. That's why you don't see anyone questioning it. You don't see anyone questioning the revelation of the flying spaghetti monster either. Like I said, do a little homework. Read Joshua through the minor prophets, and tell me based on that how much the Jews knew about a revelation at Sinai. It's a big zero. Even Joshua, in his review of Jewish history that he recites to all the people right before his death, makes no mention of it. It's a big zero.
And the answer is because it's not possible to make it up.
No, they didn't question it because they didn't know about it. And you can make anything up and get billions of people to believe it. Have you studied religion at all?
This happened. It's a historical fact.
Oh, is it? Well, then it should be pretty easy to provide evidence, right? Where's the evidence?
It's documented history.
No, it's a story that was written hundreds of years after the alleged events. Do you consider every religious text to be documented history? The Quran, the Gospels, the Iliad, the Bhagavad Gita? You can't just say, I read something in an ancient book, so it's documented and must be true. Ancient books contain truth and untruth side by side. That's the nature of ancient religious texts. Before you can say something is documented, you need to provide evidence. For example, there are historical accounts in the Bible, like the Assyrian siege on Jerusalem, that do have external corroboration. But for the Sinai revelation, not only don't you have any external corroboration, you don't even have internal corroboration. Most of the Bible is completely unaware of this alleged event because this myth of mass revelation is a late addition.
And the historicity of it is unquestionable.
No, it's not unquestionable. I'm questioning it right now, and you have absolutely no answers. If you did, you would have presented them already.
And I think that it's a time for us on Shavuos, while obviously it's a time for study, and there's a Jewish tradition to stay up the entire night and study, and that's because the Midrash tells us that the Jewish people they knew that they were going to get the Torah, but they slept in. They weren't excited like the way you were before your class trip. You wake up at 4 in the morning, you can't fall back asleep. The Jewish people weren't like that, unfortunately. And they had a certain measure of a lackadaisical attitude towards this event. And they slept in.
Another nice story. See how you can make a new myth 2,000 years after an event? But no one would ever believe that. Am I right?
Was it everyone? Probably not. But there was an element that needed to be rectified, and therefore over the years, for thousands of years already, Jewish people have a tradition to stay up the entire night of the first night of Shavuos, because in order to counteract this attitude that our ancestors had at Sinai. We stay up and we study because Torah is the lifeblood of our religion. And this is when we started on this wonderful journey of receiving the Torah and the traditions and the laws that have been the homeland, the portable homeland for the Jewish people. But it's also important to remember that on this day and this event distinguishes us from all other people and all other religions. And we can feel very safe and comfortable to know that we're not just Jewish and practicing and observing Judaism because that's what our parents told us.
Okay, what else you got?
But if we've been born in some other religion, well, we would have adopted that, and therefore we can't be sure that we're right. This event.
You mean the story that our parents told us about? Go on.
This incontrovertible historical event is evidence that we're right.
So the fact that you have a story that your parents told you is not just a story that your parents told you, but is evidence that you're right? And I suppose the fact that Christians and Muslims and Buddhists and Hindus have stories that their parents told them is evidence that they're right too? Am I following you? You didn't provide any reason to think that the Jewish story is different from anyone else's story, so I think that's pretty much where you got yourself to.
We can feel safe and confident in our religion.
Yes, everyone can feel safe and confident in their mythologies and fairy tales and conspiracy theories as long as they don't ask for evidence. What an inspiring conclusion you've reached, Rabbi.
And I think that's also a lesson that we could think about on the holiday of Shavuos. Happy holiday. Good luck staying up and studying. God bless.
What can I say? I think religion really does turn people's brains to mush. I mean, here's an intelligent rabbi, and if somebody in another religion came to him and said, "My myths are true because they are documented in my scriptures," this rabbi would have no difficulty saying, "Well, someone probably just made that stuff up. You're going to have to show me some evidence." But he just can't do it when it comes to his own faith, and instead he's reduced to the mental capacity of a 6-year-old. I think this is what religion does to people. It's sad.